Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the AutoGuide Show. We are the editors of AutoGuide.com and its many sister sites. Here we have Sebastien, say hello.
Hi guys.
And Sami.
Howdy.
And this week we have a lot of cool cars to talk about. We have the BMW M3 CS. We have the Acura RDX, Infiniti QX50, and the Subaru WRX STI.
Actually, we're getting our friend Sam to join us to talk about that.
So we're going to swap out Sebastien midway and bring in Sam, who will be a newcomer to our show.
It'll be like a pit stop.
And, yes, and it's not just a bunch of crossovers, which is what we always think we're about to talk about.
Yeah,
We've
we
got
have
some performance cars, and that's going to be fun too.
I think so too. So a new episode drops every other Friday on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Make sure to like, subscribe, and review so you never miss an episode. And we're going to start this week with an audience question from Blake Swan.
Yeah,
who is
shout out to Blake Swan.
Yeah, he's a longtime supporter of AutoGuide, and we're really thankful that he gives us so much support. And his question was basically about Cadillac. So he was basically saying that when the CTS-V came out, Cadillac had a whole bunch of momentum with their design and their engineering to take on the German automakers. Mm-hmm. And since then, they've kind of gone downhill with their product, and their stuff just isn't as exciting and competitive as it used to be. So do you think that Cadillac has what it takes to gain back some of that momentum and take on German cars?
That's so tough. I mean, Cadillac also, with the CTS and the CTS-V, that really nice art, I think it's called Art and Design.
Art and Science?
Art Science?
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Art and Science Design Language, that's what it's called. It was a very unique time to showcase really bold vehicle design, and that's when I think the other German rival, which was Lexus, was kind of going really dull and drab at the time.
Right.
And now Cadillac shows up with these really bold-looking cars, the CTS in particular, which I thought was a great-looking car, the CTS-V, which had the performance to go with it. And then I thought they followed up pretty nicely with the second-generation CTS and the ATS, and the ATS-V, which I thought was a fantastic car.
Such good cars.
And then they had those V-Sport vehicles, which was pretty cool. But now, I don't know what to say. I feel like they've slowed down. They don't have the momentum anymore. They have really nice interior designs sometimes.
I was a big fan of the interior design.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't look that great. That's the problem. Like the ATS, that gauge cluster looks dated and busted.
Well, because now it's really old, but when you go back to why we liked that car so much, it had fantastic driving dynamics.
That's true.
I think they still largely do. Like every Cadillac I've ever driven has been lovely to drive.
Yeah,
really
the chassis are great, the powertrains are great.
Yeah.
But then it kind of falls apart in these small details and the kind of stuff that makes you feel like, oh, this is a good luxury car. So like my issue with Cadillac is that they're trying too hard to be German, but I think they should just scale back a little and focus on being like American Cadillac. Like give me a big, luxurious sedan.
I don't think that Cadillac should be charging less than $100,000 for any cars.
Yeah, and you said that you don't want to see a Cadillac that weighs less than 3 tons.
No, yeah, exactly. I want big, heavy.
So you think that their method to success is to go back to something that's not being offered by the German automakers, which is a very upscale, luxurious car across the whole lineup.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. I think that the CTS and all of that art science design was very successful, and that the conversation isn't about your grandmother anymore. When you talk about CTS or whatever, any Cadillac, you're not talking about Florida, and you're not talking about 96-year-olds, which is like huge, right? That's like, that was a big stereotype about them.
Right, because they were around when Cadillac was the best thing in the universe.
Exactly, and I still think that Cadillac still has a whiff of that. You still call things the Cadillac of, right? And
I say the Rolls Royce of. That's just me.
Fair enough. The Rolls Royce is it's too much. You know,
Sure.
It's too many syllables. I think that if you take the VW model, where you, instead of making Cadillac an Audi competitor, you make it a Bentley competitor, I think that would be a better space for them to occupy. Because I think Blake is right. I think they don't really know where they want to be right now. Because the German scene is really strong right now, and they're doing a good job of owning their own variety of cars.
Right.
Lexus is doing a really great job of doing interesting,
Design, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure if it's attractive, but eye-catching is maybe the word for it.
And they've also shed that like boring
the old
persona
person as well.
Them too.
At least on the with the exterior design, the cars still drive kind of floaty, and they're not the most engaging.
But that's what people want.
Yeah, in a luxury car.
Right.
What I think is interesting is when you look at what Mercedes, BMW, Audi, and even Lexus has done, they've really expanded their lineup to include a number of vehicles, be it compact crossovers, ginormous vehicles, three-row crossovers, sedans of all size, and even some really weird stuff like four-door coupes. Cadillac doesn't have that range, doesn't have the ability to express themselves and what they're about at all.
We know that they are potentially thinking about that though, because they trademarked a bunch of names. They've done CT 1 through 9 now, and they've got names on XT 1 through 9 as well. Which I think
that's just protecting themselves.
I know they're protecting themselves, but at least the range could grow.
Yeah.
Like they're giving themselves space.
But if you look at what Cadillac offers that any other German doesn't, is a big Escalade. And so right now, like BMW doesn't have a big three-row crossover, and neither does. They're working on it, but I mean, Cadillac has always had the Escalade, and I feel like that's the car people think of when they think of Cadillac.
There's also a huge difference between what the Escalade is and what, say, a Q7 or this X7 or a Mercedes I don't know what they're called now, GLS? Yes.
The big one.
Yes. Then again, there's also the Mercedes G-Class, which is, I think, to me, that same personality in a German car, though. It's this really bold vehicle that makes you go, whoa, that's crazy.
Big square and
I hope that Cadillac keeps up with the Escalade. It needs to actually be refreshed. I think the Lincoln Navigator has now taken that position, which is, you don't want to be behind a Lincoln in any way or form. They have shown themselves to stumble into success, and I don't want Cadillac to have that same accidental success story that Lincoln has with the Navigator. There is something that should be said about Cadillac. They offer something that very few automakers have, and that's a true semi-autonomous or self-driving feature.
Right, with Super Cruise.
This is their advantage. This is their killer app, and that won't appeal to everybody, but it will appeal to people like Sebastien who want a very expensive vehicle.
That is ultra luxurious.
Why it's expensive is because it has technology like that.
Yeah, but you got other people catching up to them. Audi's got level 3 now, so they're going to jump over them, and then even Volvo, they're a few years behind, but they're going to come in with level 4 or 5 when they do. So they're not going to be able to hang on to that lead for a long time.
Yeah, we'll see how long that holds up.
Yeah.
They need to have something that makes them stand out. And before it was the design, I feel like now the design is getting a little familiar. I thought the interior design was pretty good, but again, it's gotten stale. I don't think they're really doing anything there. I thought the Escalade was special. It's been taken over by the Navigator. They're really falling behind in every single category, and in order for them to maintain their status as Cadillac, they need to do something special, and I don't know what that is. I
feel like they have been going out of their way to hire a lot of younger people in Cadillac and in Buick as well. And I think that's starting to show through. I think they're starting to take a couple more risks, but until those young people are like at the top of Cadillac and get to make those decisions, I feel like we're going to be dealing with this kind of stodgy image for a little while.
True.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the cool concepts that they've come out with in the past, so like the Escala was amazing. I love that. But the coolest thing about the Escala was that, like, yes, it was a big, luxurious sedan, but the interior was gorgeous.
That was the part of the Escala that caught my attention. It was a beautiful interior, and it was full of really neat tweaks and changes.
Yeah.
The way that, I think if you open the trunk, it would raise a little portion for you so that you could get your stuff without, reaching over and getting it.
So it's almost like these ultra luxurious touches are, maybe you guys want a Cadillac to be more than $100,000 too?
I don't disagree with you. I just feel like there has to be more than that.
You guys have talked to yourself. Well, no, obviously you need it to be like to live up to that price point. But that's what I'm saying. You need something that's ultra luxurious.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an American car that's on par with a Rolls or a Bentley, you're out of luck right now.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing.
Because there's nothing apart from maybe an Escalade, but that's mainly got size. It doesn't have the same luxury as they do.
Yeah, so that was a very long-winded answer to Blake's question. But funny enough, he has another question. And so he was basically saying that Mazda ended up putting more power into the MX-5, which everyone was really excited about. And they were small companies, so it's not that easy for them to pull something like that off.
Right.
He was wondering if we see Toyota ever putting more power in the 86.
Okay. That's a tough question to answer because the engine in the 86 isn't quite a Toyota engine. it's
Subaru.
a Subaru engine. And so I don't know what they'd have to do in order to give it more power, if that means that the Subaru model also has to have more power, if both automakers have to sign off on that decision, or the cost associated with developing that engine further. I also think it's kind of short-sighted to think if Mazda is doing it, then Toyota can do it too. I think Mazda is a small automaker, and they have a very limited range that's offered to a wide audience across the globe, while Toyota is a very large automaker and has cars that we've never heard of or seen of that is very successful in other markets. And those are priorities for them in much more of a way than the 86's engine is.
Well, even just for Mazda, they've always been like the performance brand. And so for them, putting more power in their sports car isn't that crazy of a thing, right? It's just an obvious solution for them. Whereas Toyota putting more power in the 86, that just doesn't concern them at all. They'd rather put more safety into the RAV4 than put more power into an 86, because that's just where their interests are, right?
The volume brand.
Exactly.
Cars are.
I mean, I'd also love to see an 86 come with more power, but at the same time, I know so many people who have bought an FRS, an 86, or a BRZ and changed it all up on their own anyway. So why should Toyota spend all of that development money just for somebody to come in and be like, just put a turbocharger in it and fix it.
And they also have a Supra coming, so if you want a sporty Toyota with more power, you're just going to have to wait like 10 years to get a Supra.
But assuming that he's talking about the 86 in general, so BRZ or 86, what do we expect on it? Like, is it inevitable that an STI is coming, or do you think that Subaru will continue to be like, no, we're just going to give you more.
Here's the special edition, tuned by STI, but not a real STI.
I think when it comes time to retire the BRZ in 86, I don't know, we haven't heard anything about a second generation model yet, so I'm assuming that it's on its way out. It's been a long time since we've seen a really radical change to this vehicle, but Subaru has spent a lot of time and money adding STI parts to it with that TS that we talked about a few weeks ago, and I think that they're just gearing themselves up for a car that can accept a new power plant that they deem necessary.
So they're building their way up to it one part at a time.
And I think it'll be a very special edition model, maybe even, I don't know if it's a race-only model or something like that.
Do you think that's risky though? Like,
of course it is.
But just working up to it, and like with these little incremental changes, and then when it finally arrives, you're going to be like, well, why don't I just get that last special edition one with all the parts?
That's the way it works. You got to milk it.
The appetite is nowhere. It hasn't gone. Like anytime you talk about BRZ, people are like, STI, turbo, 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 and we all. But you can add your own. It's fun. But
And I think that's the point, is they've developed something very niche, and they need to milk it for as long as they can. And that's probably why we don't know if there's a successor coming.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for your questions, Blake.
Keep it up.
Keep it up. Those were great questions. And if you have a question, email tips@AutoGuide.com or leave a comment on the YouTube video, and we'll try to answer it in the next episode. Right now we're going to move on. We're going to start talking about fun stuff like the BMW M3 CS. And we have notes here on the podcast, and it just says kinda butt next to it.
What?
So explain your notes here, Sebastien.
Hold up. This is a limited edition BMW M3.
Fastest one ever.
The most powerful M3 ever. 460 horsepower, 443 pound-feet of torque. Only available with a 7-speed dual clutch, which is really a 7-speed dual clutch. It's like it will, if you want to be going at the red line for 100 miles, then it'll let you do that.
Nice.
So there is that. It's also kind of a dim-witted transmission. Or maybe the first year is just not really meant to be used. It's very track-focused. Okay. So when you're driving around town, as I was doing here, occasionally you'll be going, and then you'll just tip into the throttle a little more, and it'll like get confused and start bucking and shaking him around.
So it acts like an automated manual.
Yeah, basically. But like, I've driven manuals a lot, and first year has never bucked on me quite that much.
Right.
And if you're in a car where everybody's already ready just to hate you, just to hate your guts, and you can't handle an automatic, and you start bucking around, they just look at you and dismiss you. They're like, yeah, that guy
can't drive,
idiot. But I think I just didn't really like it. It didn't grow on me. I was cold to it.
Why? What about it made you feel that way?
I think it's because BMW was so focused on delivering G-forces. They were so focused on getting it to be super fast, super able to like grip for miles and miles and miles. This thing was on Michelin Pilot Cup Sport 2, whatever tires. So it was like super grippy and super fast, 3.7 seconds to 60.
Nice.
But you end up feeling like a tennis ball in one of those dog toys where all you feel is your seat. All you feel is the seat, either the back pushing against you or the bolsters pushing against your sides.
Right.
You don't feel anything through your hands. You don't feel anything through your feet. And it doesn't really communicate with you. I didn't find it that engaging to drive around town.
Interesting.
I've heard, I didn't get a chance to drive it on track. So I've heard that it's got like real sharp turn in and it's really well set up for track. And obviously it's all rear wheel drive, so you can get the tail to hang out whenever you want. Not that I did, but in case, in case you had to for some reason, like you run an on-ramp or something, you can get the tail to hang out just a little bit. So it's fun and fast, and I have no problem with that. It's just, it doesn't communicate with you.
That's really interesting because the M3 and the M4 have like a problem with, I think the right word is like passion and engagement. And forever they've been like painted as very capable cars that just don't make you feel anything. I've always said that the M2 is the real enthusiast car, and maybe even the M240, which actually is also a lot of fun to drive.
That's a car I would buy.
I know, I agree with you. But I thought with the CS, they were going to make a vehicle that was a little bit harder in terms of, a little bit more hardcore.
Yeah.
And talked to you and told you about the experience that you're having, which is something that I think all enthusiasts really like.
I think they only succeeded in doing half of that. It's harder. And that, I think, might be my biggest problem with it.
It's super stiff.
It's super stiff, which I don't mind. If you're going to do something super stiff, then that's fine. Like, that's a decision that you can make, that you're allowed to make as an automaker. It's just that you better deliver on that communication and on that pure driving pleasure that they haven't here.
Yeah.
So it falls short on
So if you're going to be
things.
that stiff for the purpose of performance, make everything else that hardcore, like the steering and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what they did with the transmission, and now you're complaining about it.
No, the transmission is good. It's quick. It's very fast. It's just that first gear bucks and it makes you look like an idiot. But
actually, I want you to describe what it's like driving such a rare vehicle, 1 in 1,200. And do people recognize it? A, do people notice it? Because your car had a very unique look to it. It was like this.
I think people in the know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anybody.
Gray model.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember what the color is called. It's like anthracite gray or something like that. It's not it. But it's. I think people see it and people know that you're driving something special for sure because it's got big, huge wheel arches and it is very loud. Although I wouldn't call it tuneful. I don't think it sounds that great, but it is loud. So
that's the problem with all BMWs.
Right.
The new BMWs just do not have a great noise to them.
Yeah, I honestly, when I was driving the 340i, I thought that sounded better even than this. But regardless, people see you on the street and hear you coming, and I think you guys will agree. I'm a pretty affable guy. Like, I'm not perfect.
Nicest Sebastien I know.
Don't make me admit that on the podcast.
I am not used to having people just be so ready to hate my guts. Just you look at people on the street and they almost go like this to each other.
Yeah.
Like, look at this douchebag.
That's the thing.
This douche canoe is sailing through.
Every time I see anyone in an M3 or an M4, I have that reaction. I'm like, douche. I'm not letting you in traffic.
And that's not limited to
BMWs.
And it's not limited to people in the know. People, everybody knows that if you own that car, it's a high watermark for douchebaggery. It's just.
How much does this car cost?
This one was 114 Canadian.
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
For a BMW M3?
Wow.
It demands a lot of you.
Okay. I wouldn't
buy that much money, especially if it wasn't as engaging as
the only thing you're getting is a potential collector's item in the future.
Yeah.
Well, then I'd rather just get like the M2 competition or something, which would be cheaper and like probably way more fun.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. Don't look for an argument from me here.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking like if you're buying in that sphere, I guess. What would keep you from buying the M2 competition versus the M3 CS?
Well, you want the rear seats and rear door capability.
Do you really? Does it
But if you're getting a
you?
performance car,
I mean, that's the whole point. The
I
M3 is
guess.
supposed to be this thing that's do-it-all sort of vehicle.
Yeah, but it's not at that point. The suspension is so harsh that you really gonna take your kids to hockey practice in that thing? I mean, maybe once, but like I agree, you have the option of doing that, but it is so harsh that you would never. The other thing about it is that apart from the Alcantara, you lose all luxury. And at that point, what's to keep you from buying a Camaro?
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't say
That's harsh.
Camaro.
It's got the Camaro SS. It's got as much
You're
horsepower.
going off the
half
rails.
the price.
Half the price.
You're going off the rails
and
here,
it's a
buddy.
really great performance car.
What are you
and
talking
the only
about?
thing you're giving up when you get the Camaro is the luxury, which you've given up in the M3 CS. I don't understand.
So you're saying a Camaro SS would be able to keep up with this car on a racetrack?
I don't know about that, but it's got roughly the same amount of horsepower.
Okay.
It's got rear-wheel drive. It's got a manual if you want
Yeah,
it.
the chassis is great.
And it's got a really great chassis. I mean, it communicates with you. I was just in one on a track, and it's a fun car to drive. Different scenarios, I admit, but still. What's to prevent you from buying that, from spending half as much, getting a Camaro that is just as useful and just as luxurious?
I guess the badge.
Yeah, apart from the badge.
Yeah.
What have they been putting in his water and his coffee? Like,
He got real salty all of a
no,
sudden.
but like he also did this whole thing about the $100,000 Cadillac. Like, you're outside the box and then some. A Camaro with a BMW?
It's not crazy. Like, I see where he's getting
I
at.
almost say that you could buy a regular
What
M3
does
and
it-
then buy a Camaro afterwards.
You
Like,
can buy both.
yeah.
I agree with you. The Camaro doesn't compete with the regular M3. But with the M3 CS, what advantage does it have over a Camaro?
It's a special edition vehicle. It's rare. It gets you attention from the BMW Owners Club and
it
the
gets you, and
Bimmerfest
it gets
crowd.
you the wide hatred of
Everybody else.
Every BMW gets that.
It's true.
Exactly. And
That's
if you're
why
a Camaro,
they'll tailgate everybody like that.
and apart from a predilection for murder, that's all you need to have a Camaro. So I get it. It's not the same car, but all I'm saying is if you're taking away all my luxury, you're taking away all my comfort, and you're not delivering me a drive that's that great, why wouldn't I buy a Camaro, which doesn't have the luxury, costs way less, and does have a nice drive?
I don't know what to say. This is ridiculous.
I see where he's going. I mean, like, I don't think people are going to cross-shop them, but I see the point you're trying to
There's
make.
so many
not,
other cars you can buy at $100,000. You can buy a 911.
I know, exactly, but that's my point, is that $100,000,
Yeah. How would you spend it if you had that money? That's the
exactly,
point.
and I don't think
I'd buy a Cayman.
And
or
I
a
really
718,
don't think
whatever
that-
they're called. 17 Caymans.
and I really don't think that the M3 CS is worth it, is my point.
Point taken.
Okay.
He got really passionate about that
There
one.
you go.
It's-
It is weird though. Like I agree, it's weird to get an enthusiast car and as enthusiasts not get entertained by it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's other vehicles, the Alfa Romeo Quadrifoglio,
Yeah.
which is a very entertaining vehicle.
Oh, which is so much better.
It sounds much better than
Way
this
more
inline
engaging.
6 would. It's got a pretty good transmission as well.
Yeah.
and people don't think you're a douchebag.
And people don't think you're a douchebag. And I know that it's also a sacrifice. You're sacrificing some reliability, but you're willing to make that sacrifice because it's so nice to drive.
I
There's
would.
reasons. There's,
Yeah, exactly.
There's a trade-off.
There are
Yeah.
very good reasons.
I
And
think.
then, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, if it came down to which one I would buy, I would get the Quadrifoglio over
100%.
over
I feel like
this.
we always have this discussion. To me, it's that AMG C63. I think that's
Sure.
an amazing vehicle that doesn't get hatred from people when they see it, this angry-looking Mercedes coming their
Sounds
way.
unbelievably good, too.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
And then there's also the RS5, which is also
It's a really good
another
car,
option,
yeah.
all-wheel drive, and can perform just as well as an M3 could.
Yeah, I
Right.
can hang out.
We're gonna get a lot of hate mail from the BMW
But
crowd.
I suspect
all I'm
that I
saying
will.
is that they don't have that limited availability that the CS has, so that's
but
what
the-
some people are paying extra for.
I know, but is that really worth it? I mean,
No, of
I
course
can,
not.
like, there aren't that many Tatras on the, or that's a bad example. There aren't that many, Skodas on the road right now, but that doesn't make them good.
Okay. Point
There's
taken.
a lot of Skodas on the road, just not here.
It's just not here.
The Skoda Superb, what a great name. I love Skoda. They have the best name. Skoda Yeti, Skoda Superb.
Kodiak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we got next? What's the next car you want to talk about?
We're going to talk about two crossovers,
Oh,
and these
right.
are the only two crossovers we'll talk about on this episode, so count your lucky stars. We have the Infiniti QX50, which we compared with the Acura RDX.
Okay, so these aren't actually the really boring crossovers that will put people to sleep. These are two really stylish, brand new, all new generation vehicles with some pretty fancy technology under the hood. So let's talk about the QX50, which I think is the more significant vehicle. The old QX50 was essentially a wagon version of the G35 or the Q50 as it's known now, and now they've really made it into something very different on its own, and that's improved it in some ways and made it worse in other ways. Now it's an actual family vehicle. The old car had limited seat,
no room,
limited space for both passenger and cargo, and now this has a full-size vehicle that can work for families. They've also included, for the first time ever, in a production vehicle, something called a variable compression engine, variable compression turbocharged engine. It makes 268 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. It feels pretty good, but can also vary the compression in order to provide more fuel economy or more performance. In the real world, I found it worked really well. On the highway, this thing was extremely fuel efficient. And especially when you're not gunning it all the time, when you're not driving it like, say, you would a BMW M3 CS, it performed really well. However, once you got into the city, the mileage would drop significantly. It would be a serious issue that I think they need to revisit, because I'm not sure how many buyers would go into the city or live in urban places like cities seeing lots of stop-and-go traffic. I feel like that should be the performance there should be improved.
Well, I don't think that's fair. It's a reasonably small SUV that is also very attractive, I think. So
Right.
I think that's kind of set up perfectly for a city. Like, I think that's, if not ideal for a city living, that's like, it does seem like the type of thing that people in the city would buy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem with the engine is that it's interesting and it's a great experiment, but it delivers either fuel economy or performance. It doesn't. It's not like some cheat code where you get both.
Right.
And around town, you do. On the highway, it's seriously impressive. And
It's a perfect road tripping vehicle.
yeah,
like,
and
honestly.
it feels really nice to drive. Well, it feels fine to drive. But around town, it's not fuel efficient enough, and it doesn't give you like it's.
So they're selling it as you get the best of both worlds, which is a bit of a. It's not really fair to say that.
You do get very good parts of two worlds, but there's a third world that's missing there.
Sure.
And it's also paired to a CVT transmission that's actually one of the hindrances of the vehicle. Not in any performance way. It just
sounds terrible.
It just doesn't feel. When you hear that happening, when you put your foot into it and you hear the CVT rev that engine up, it ruins the luxury feeling of the vehicle. That's the only thing that really screws the car up, and they should go back and figure out how to make that CVT quieter, because then the car would be far easier to live with. There is something worth buying about this vehicle that really makes it stand out in the entire segment, and it's the interior of the fully loaded models, which have this gorgeous two-tone interior and just can't be beat by any of its rivals. I'm really impressed with what they're capable of doing with the fully loaded models.
Yeah, and they're doing something different, which is really cool. So instead of looking at someone else's interior and being like, oh, let's just do exactly what they did, they kind of thought outside the box, and I think it paid some really big dividends for them.
And I know it sounds like we're being really positive on the QX50. It does have some downsides. I mean, that CVT groan is annoying. You do have to pay a lot to get that interior, that fancy interior. I think a fully loaded version of the QX50 will set you back almost $60,000, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I also wasn't a huge fan of the steering. I thought it was far too light. Like, it was one of those one-finger jobs where you could do that. But you could put it into a different driving mode, and it kind of helps that. But then again, you do that at the expense of fuel economy.
There is a personalized mode where you can put the sport steering with the normal or eco-friendly engine or performance features. So you can balance it a little bit, but I agree with you. No matter what, you're going to get this very disconnected feeling from the steering wheel. The infotainment system isn't my favorite. Doesn't have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay support. Takes a little bit of time to get used to, and is a tiny bit laggy as well.
Yeah.
They could do with some cleaning up of that system. There's also a little knob and joystick that controls one of the two screens in the car, and I don't understand why. And that's all I've got against the vehicle. I still would recommend it. I think it's gorgeous enough to purchase.
Yep.
It's refined enough to purchase, with the exception of whenever you want to get going on the highway, and that CVT perks up. and it gets really good fuel economy.
Yeah, there's no real deal breakers for me with the QX50. Like, I actually quite enjoy driving it.
Which is in stark contrast to what we found in the Acura
Oh
RDX.
my god.
I don't know where to begin with what my issues with the RDX was.
Touchpad.
You want to start with the infotainment system.
I just want to talk about how much I hate this infotainment system. Like, in most cars, there is not a deal breaker. This Acura RDX had one of the worst infotainment systems I've ever experienced.
And I know what this, I mean, sometimes you'll hear us gripe about an infotainment system, and it's probably only because we just got in it like a day or two. But after spending a week in the Acura RDX, there was nothing more I wanted to do but throw this system out the window.
It was
I would
bad.
do everything in my power to not use it.
Yeah.
And it was infuriating.
So, like, I just want to explain to the viewers here that it uses this little mouse touchpad, similar to what Lexus uses in a lot of their cars.
Which is something that we've also criticized.
It
but
sucks.
Somehow they made this worse.
So, when you picture the mouse pad on your laptop and how it operates...
I don't even want you to describe it.
I know, because it makes
hurts.
me so mad. So, for example, to type something into the infotainment system of the Acura, you have to slide your finger around to figure out a keyboard. But every time you take your finger off, the mouse like bounces back to a center position.
Yes.
So you lose all the progress that you've done, right? So you just have to reprogram your brain to not take your finger off the touchpad while you're trying to hit these tiny little buttons in the touchscreen while you're trying to drive.
Yeah, that's impossible. It's actually impossible. And the other alternative is to draw on the touchpad the letters, so like write the thing out. And that also did not work very well. Every time I tried to put the number 1, it would give me an L or a J or an I, and I just wanted a 1. And it was getting annoying and frustrating every. And when you try to put a backspace, it put a dash. What the heck?
Yeah, so like I just feel like infotainment systems should work and you should know how to use it the moment you get in a car.
Yeah.
No matter what car it is, you should just be able to find a radio station or put in an address with no drama whatsoever. So just to make sure I wasn't crazy, every single person that rode in the car with me, I told them to try to put an address into the nav. And after like a minute, everyone was like, I can't, I'm not going to do this.
Work.
And they got angry about it.
And you also have to put into consideration when you're trying to operate this touchscreen and every time you remove your finger off the touchpad, every time you're using this touchpad and you remove your finger from the touchpad, it recenters itself. Imagine you're driving. And roads are not smooth. They are bumpy. They have the elevation changes. You could be going over a train some train tracks.
Yeah.
And you will lose your progress and your location on that touchpad while you're driving. It makes no sense to use while driving.
And there's no like haptic feedback either, so you can't just look at the road and be like, you can't feel when you're hitting a letter, whereas Lexus, it's like bing, bing. It makes a little noise when you hit it, which is also annoying because then it's always like bing, 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 and you're just trying to drive and it's binging at you. But this is just as bad.
Acura also makes a lot of noise at you. When you're driving the car around and you have any of the driver assistance or safety features on, it is certain that you're going to cause an accident.
And die.
Which is something that is not very confidence-inspiring when you're just trying to get home or to the office and it's like, you better hit the brakes, brakes! And you're like, just take it easy.
It always thought I was gonna crash into something, and like I thought, okay, maybe I was just a really aggressive driver. So I scaled it back a little to drive less aggressively than I would normally drive, and it was still beeping at me all the time.
Actually, sometimes it will just put the flash of brakes, but not beep at you when you scale it back. But it is still like, hey buddy.
It's just annoying. So like, for example, if you're accelerating to make a pass, and you have to get like kind of close to the person in front of you, it'll actually slam on the brakes and ruin your passing maneuver.
It is something that I had, every time I got into the vehicle, I had to turn off the forward collision warning, which actually takes like a good 5 seconds to do. You have to hold the button for a little bit longer. And we couldn't do our video without turning that feature off. When we're doing our car-to-car footage, it's constantly freaking out the whole time. And you'll probably see it in the footage of like me, like, what is happening? I need to turn this feature off.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on, when the video comes out, keep an eye on my face and see if I'm freaking out or not. Or like looking around for this button, or to stop the beeping.
I mean, but the RDX isn't all bad. Like for me, those two things were big deal breakers.
I couldn't drive the vehicle. It sounded like I was going to cause an accident, or it was too difficult to use the infotainment system all the time. And then the rest of the vehicle just wasn't enough to overcome these serious issues that I had with it.
It did drive really well.
It
I
did.
really preferred the way it drove over the Infiniti. It's a little bit more sporty, perhaps.
Well, that makes, I mean, one of the things that bugged me about the RDX is it had a sport mode and then a sport plus mode, and I also did not know, and a sport transmission mode, and I didn't know what the difference was between all of these three modes, these three setups.
But you didn't need it because it drove fine enough in the whatever comfort mode. It just felt good to drive. It also has an all new like a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. It's a good engine.
It is a good engine.
It had
makes
like
a little bit more horsepower than the Infiniti.
272 and 280 torques.
And it has a 10-speed automatic that feels a little bit more sporty and engaging than the CVT.
And it's pretty refined.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed is that when I first started driving it, I had it for maybe a few nights, and it never turned off its engine despite having automatic engine start-stop. We noticed that when we shot the video, and then you told me on the weekend.
It just started working all of a sudden.
So and maybe it needed to get the engine needed to be broken in or something.
I don't know what the issue was, but when I had it over the weekend, it wouldn't stop doing that, like at the most inopportune times.
Like every time you come to a stop sign, it turns off the engine. You're like, no, I have to go now.
Yeah, but for example, I came to a stop, the engine turned off, I put it in park, and it turned the engine off again. It's like, if I'm in park, don't you think I'm going to turn off the car? Yeah. And you should just keep the engine off?
I hate that actually when the car turns off when you put it into park, and then you have to turn off the car. The car thinks that you don't know what automatic start stop is, and then turns on the car again, and you're like, no, turn off.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that happen to you? I think it
All
happens
cars
with
do that.
BMWs.
I think all cars do
And
that.
Volvos?
If you put it in park, it'll start again so that you can turn it off. It's really weird.
I
Very
think there has
bizarre.
been only like 1 or 2 cars where it was smart enough to know, like, okay, she's turning off the car, I'm just going to stay off.
Let's see where she goes from here.
Yeah.
But it's
Maybe she's just putting it to park so that she can leave again.
Maybe
like
she's just
immediately
hanging out in
soon.
park, you know?
Immediately after, yeah.
Do we not all put our cars in park at the stop sign?
Such a simple thing that like I wish people would pay more attention to.
I think the other alternative is that the Acura was much more affordable in the starting trim level.
Yeah, and it did have.
And it looked good.
It looked really good. I liked the way it looked, and it also had a lot of practical features. There were a lot of little storage cubbies for stuff in the front. In the trunk, it had huge like hidden storage compartments under the floor.
But the interior was not as special as what the Infiniti had.
Right.
It also, I mean, they tried to do something differently. They made it look really sci-fi. It looked like a really funky cockpit, like out of Star Trek. And it had a bajillion buttons, and that was also confusing, so you didn't really know, like, it was... Trying to get anything done in the car was not a fun experience.
It's just not very intuitive, and I think some automakers are trying too hard to appear to have something techy or fancy, but they completely forget about functionality and usability.
Right.
And that's a huge problem.
I think the steering wheel didn't have a phone call answer or hang up button, which was really...
Oh yeah,
weird.
you couldn't... Okay, so going back to the terrible infotainment system, it's one screen, but it is a split screen.
Yep.
And so this little touchpad controls the bigger side of the split screen, and there's this little like toggle touchpad that controls the little second part of the touch screen.
And so while you're in the navigation mode on the main screen, you have the audio information on the second screen. And so I got a phone call, and it showed up in that second screen, and I had literally no idea how to answer it until I realized later that that other touchpad handles that other screen. It was the most confusing thing I've ever experienced. I'm like, how do I get my cursor over there and answer the phone call? Anyways, I really hope that they fix things with the infotainment system there. It had Apple CarPlay, which would have been a huge help actually, but it didn't have Android Auto, and I really hope they get their act together there. What else do we got?
Actually, we're gonna say goodbye to Sebastien here, and we're gonna bring in Sam, who's our news editor.
Okay, tag in.
Stay tuned. So hi, Sam.
Hi guys.
Tell the crowd what you do for AutoGuide.
I write the news on AutoGuide, so if you ever go on the website, you see kind of daily news articles. I probably wrote them. I do some car reviews as well, thanks to these two who throw me a bone every now and then.
And this time we throw you a pretty good one.
Yeah, they really did. So a couple weeks ago, I drove a 2019 Subaru WRX STI from here to Trois-Rivières, Quebec, which is normally like a 7.5 hour drive, but it took me like 10 hours both ways.
Nice.
God.
I thought the STI was a fast car. Like, you should have gotten there sooner.
It was mostly just me like speeding in between mass amounts of traffic before I hit them, because it was a long weekend here in Canada. So everyone kind of drives up to their cottages or wherever they might be going. And the 401, huge main artery road here, and it was just blocked pretty much the whole way. So I was in the car for all of 24 hours. So if you want to know things about the STI, I'm your guy.
Okay, so why were you in Quebec? Why did you have to drive all the way out there?
Well, Subaru invited me out there to take the car to go watch Global Rallycross.
Cool.
And World Rallycross. So they were racing in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, and the reason why they wanted me to go was to go see Jacques Villeneuve, Canada's most famous F1 driver, perhaps, or his dad, Gilles. And so that was him he did one race. He grew up in Montreal, grew up in Quebec. So yeah, he was racing an STI. He did okay. I interviewed him once, and he said he was having trouble because on a rallycross car, you hold the top button for the gear lever, and that provides an overboost, and then you grab like kind of a brake, sort of like a handbrake, and then you floor it and build the boost up and let go, and that launches the car. And he kept forgetting to release the thing. He would just release the button. So he got some bad starts, and he didn't do too well, but he told me he wants to do a full season next year.
Nice.
So he's kind of maybe trying to work on it with Subaru right now.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the car. Did you love it? Did you hate it?
Yeah, so what is there to say about this year's version of the STI? They did give it a pretty good refresh last year, and I want to know what's coming along with this year's model.
Well, I think the thing that I got like the most questions about was everyone's like, what happened to the wing? Did the wing fall off?
You had a wingless one.
Yeah. So it had no wing. Well, it has a little tiny wing. So for 2019, you can get sort of like a wing delete option that gives you the tiny lip spoiler, they call it. So my car had that. And so the most interesting thing they changed, I guess, was that you can now order an STI without the Boy Racer vape wing.
I also found your car to look very different too. Most STIs I see are that
Blue.
World Rally blue, and your car was definitely not blue.
Yeah, no, it was like kind of rental car spec. So they call it ice silver metallic. So it's just silver, no wing. So if you weren't looking very closely, or you're not a big Subaru fan, you might not even fully have realized that it was an STI.
I think that's cool
really
because
liked
the
that.
I agree. I think I like that because the STI gets way too much attention everywhere it goes because it's got this big wing, it's this gorgeous blue, it's loud.
Everyone wants to race you.
And everyone thinks, or you're making like a scene out of going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And then you've got this silver one with an understated lip spoiler, trunk lid spoiler. You can get away with it.
And no wing. Yeah, I look like an Uber driver.
But did you like driving it?
Yeah, I really like driving it a lot. Like so much so where I was like, maybe I'll get one day, or maybe I'll buy one because I really like the manual. Really mechanical steering, makes lots of noises, which I like. I actually kind of like a sports car I like it when the noise like penetrates the cabin and you can hear the transmission clinking, and so that car has a lot of that. Really mechanical, really nice to drive in that way. But the flip side of that was, like I said, it was a 10-hour road trip. So like maybe 4 hours in, I was like, okay, I kind of hate this. Like my back started to hurt. The seats are really hard.
It's loud.
It's loud.
It's got a very heavy clutch, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's got a heavy clutch.
And if you get stuck in that thing in traffic, it's not an enjoyable
Leg
experience.
day for one of your legs.
Additionally, I think we took this thing to the track last year, and I remember telling Sebastien, like, hey, the clutch is different than every other car like we have here. You might stall it. And Sebastien was like, nah, whatever,
I can drive,
Stalls
idiot.
cars.
And he immediately stalled it, and he was like, oh, I see.
Yeah, I stalled it too. When I first picked it up, I stalled it.
Yeah.
It's a serious...
It's a little bit tricky. It takes a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
agree with you. It's a car that I think gives you really strong positive first impression, and then that wears you down the longer you have it.
Definitely.
Because the suspension's also so stiff, and I can't imagine how like uncomfortable it would have been over like Montreal roads.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty rough, and I find that I probably have a pretty good tolerance for that. Like I'm spry, I'm pretty young, so I won't get beat up too bad by a really stiff car. But even after a while, even me, I was pretty uncomfortable in it. I also hated the nav. It had no idea what it was doing. So it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but I wasn't using it because I wanted to see how Subaru's Starlink system worked. Right. And up on the highway on the way up in Quebec, they sort of have these off ramps that they go off, and then you can go and take like an exit road off, or you can easily quickly get back on the highway. Let's say you took the wrong one. So I don't know why but this nav would just send me off onto the on-ramp
Every
and then
time,
tell me
that's how you
immediately
get
to get back on. I felt like an idiot. I'm like going off and on, and I was in Quebec trying to get somewhere. I was following the nav just trying to get there. So it got confused like that, and then it did it on a couple similar roads here in Toronto. And it just has usability problems. Like you would go to select the Sirius XM from the list of stations, let's say it was on 55 or something, and then I would close it down and I'm driving along, and then I go to reopen it, and the menu has defaulted back up to 0, so you got to tap all the way down to go to 55, right?
Yeah.
So like it just has a lot of usability problems, things like that, where it was super frustrating to use.
Right.
I find that Starlink, even if it's the updated one, it's still not very responsive.
It's not very fast.
Yeah.
No. And like another usability thing was normally the background of the map will switch from daylight to nighttime on its own.
Yeah.
This just wouldn't do it. It was on auto. I went to the
Blinding
settings.
you?
Yeah, I'm like driving. I'm like, and then there's kind of like a windy road at night, and I was like, oh, this is nice, but I cannot see. And, and like, so then I pulled over and I had to turn it off into the night mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, I experienced issues like that with the nav,
Right.
And that's probably the biggest complaint I'd have about it.
Right. But driving it, which is what this car is all about, you're on board?
Awesome, love
Okay.
it.
It's I agree with him. And also we've taken to the track, and it takes a beating. It does not slow down.
It likes the abuse, I feel
It really
like.
does.
That's
the
the
brakes
kinda
and the
impression I got,
tires
too.
just do not fade. I felt like it was just waiting for more. And
It wants to do it all day, and you kind of get that on the road too, where it's like, hey, do bad things,
Right.
accelerate.
It's just like telling
yeah.
you.
Accelerate away from the light quickly, and speed here and speed there, and you're like, stop, I'm trying to be
Yeah.
responsible, Subaru. And it's always like, no, let's go fast. That's all I know.
I kind of like that though.
Yeah.
And blipping the throttle for a downshift also is really like satisfying. It sounds great, I think, with
Yeah.
that car. A lot of people think that the Boxers sound a little tractory, and I think the STI has that noise like down pat. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's got a nice induction noise coming from the front. I think with an STI too, and maybe WRX owner could let me know, but I feel like it's sort of like a Mini or a Jeep where you're in a club and you get like the thumbs up with
Yeah.
a Jeep wave or something, because other STI people were like, hey, nice car, and this was Rallycross, there's a lot of STI people in Quebec at the
There you
time
go.
and things like that. So I was like, yeah, I'm a part of the club for 1 week. And that's kind of cool too. I think people are attracted to cars like that with a bit of a cult following, and they like to be a part of that club.
And one of my favorite parts about the STI, is that it truly is an all year long sports car. When the snow hits, this thing does not slow down either. I mean, and it's got extra functions that allow you to gain traction in low traction situations.
STI
Low
drivers
grip
with
situations.
winter tires, cockiest drivers ever.
That's true.
Because they know they can get away with
That's
it.
very
They're like
true.
BMW drivers in the summer.
Yeah. And I like how it's got all, like, you can change the diff settings too. I find that to be a really like car enthusiast focused thing,
Right.
where it's like only true car enthusiasts, true connoisseur of driving would appreciate, really specific diff settings like that too. So yeah, it's definitely a car for the driver, and for that reason I really liked it. I don't know if I would buy one to drive every day because it's just so stiff.
Right.
And the seats are pretty uncomfortable and things like that. But
What a sacrifice you've got to make
definitely.
in order to appreciate that driving
yeah,
feel.
I think a lot of people probably end up in a WRX that way, where
Right.
they were like, I really like the STI, but it's like maybe a bit too much, and then you dial it back one, and you might find a happy medium.
Right. Cool.
So yeah,
That's a good call.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, let's finish it up with let's finish up strong with what you're driving, Jodi.
So I just picked up a McLaren 720S yesterday.
Whoa. Okay.
And this, right now, this goes down as the craziest, fastest, and most expensive thing I've ever driven.
Really?
In my dozen years as an automotive journalist, this is like the best. I've peaked here.
Okay, where should we start? Let's start with the power plant. What's found in this thing?
Okay, twin turbo 4-liter V8.
Okay.
It has 720 horsepower, although some
What?
people are saying it's 710, but they named it the 720 because of the 720 horsepower.
All
And it
right.
has 568 pound-feet of torque.
All right. And
It is silly fast.
what do you mean?
It gets to 62 in 2.9 seconds.
What?
And
Okay.
I did it for the first time yesterday, and I was laughing like an idiot.
So I've been in cars that fast, and every time you're in traffic or you're like on the highway, and you've got maybe like the HOV lane, and you hit the gas, the car goes into the lowest gear it can, and it just rockets you forward.
Yep.
It's like you're in a time machine. Like it feels like everyone else has stopped.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me because there's like it's so many noises and the turbos are so loud. I love that. I love to hear like turbos just spooling behind my head. And so it's just in general like a very visceral, very dramatic driving experience.
Okay.
And it is a twin turbo V8, but it feels almost naturally aspirated in how immediate that delivery is. It just like charges and won't stop, you know. And I didn't have the guts to see when that power would start to dip.
I don't know.
Because I didn't want to lose my car, my driver's license, so I didn't get to push it. And like full disclosure, I haven't tracked it or anything.
Right.
I haven't like gone ham on it. I've been doing mostly legal things.
Okay.
That's what I'm telling the public.
That's what you're telling us all.
And yeah, it's fantastic. I just love how dramatic it is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Tell me more though. Like I've been, the only McLaren I've been in was, I guess, one of the predecessors to the 720, which is the 12C.
Right.
And that was it was a very fast car, and it also was surprisingly like comfortable and compliant over the rough roads in the city. I was really surprised at how composed it was in crappy situations.
Yeah, I was really surprised too. And I mean, I drove Sam into the office this morning. We took this supercar on the 3-kilometer commute to work through traffic.
Yeah,
it was so
work
overkill.
carpool.
So overkill. But the engine in this is actually like an evolution of the one that was in the 12C.
Okay.
And so, I mean, like, McLarens haven't always had like, people don't think of McLaren and think, oh yeah, that engine sounds amazing. And like, maybe that's one of the downfalls of the 720S is that it doesn't sound that good.
Okay.
But it does make a lot of noise, and it is dramatic.
Dramatic is the best way to put it. I want you to tell me all of the people who have done something. You say you've been behaving nicely on the road, but for whatever reason, when you're in a supercar like this, people are like, sensibility goes out the window for everyone else around you. No matter how safe you are, suddenly people drive like they've never been on a road before.
So I saw a guy like walk into a pole because he was just
What?
like,
No.
because he was looking at the car and his friend had to like move him out of the way of the pole. And this CRV like stopped traffic. I was stopped at a light just behind a few cars, and the guy in the lane next to me just stopped traffic to like put his whole body out of the window of his CRV to take a photo of me.
Did he use an iPad?
No, but that would have been an iPad on a selfie stick. That would have been hilarious. And people just go nuts over it. And I saw a little boy, and he was just like, like he went nuts, and it was so cute to see because that's how you know a car is cool. Because like, you know, a 3-year-old doesn't know anything about cars, but they just see something and they're like, that is dope.
That's exactly how I characterize supercars or any fun cars like that. When somebody who's never seen a cool car and they like, that's the thing, I like it. You're like, sweet, it worked.
Yeah. And just going back to it, the 12C you thought was really comfortable. The 720 is super comfortable over rough roads.
Okay.
And mind you, driving in the city, I keep it in comfort mode.
Right.
So it has an adaptive suspension,
fine.
and you can crank it up to track.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like it's just you crank it into track, and the steering, like any little movement, the car will just go.
Darts,
it's so responsive, right?
That's sweet.
But yeah, super comfortable, and you know, not that scary to drive.
That's what I was surprised at with the 12C. However, there were some really small things that need a refinement in the 12C, and I want to know, you need to tell me the following things about your 720S.
Sure.
When I had the 12C, the only way to open the door was to feel up the side of the car until it opened.
To warm it up a little.
And that was really awkward when you're, especially if people didn't realize you had the car and you're walking up to this thing and you're
touching
like,
people's.
excuse me, this is my ride. And then finally,
this is my car, folks.
Yeah.
Just don't mind me. I'm just have to pet it.
So does this have a handle yet?
It
Because
doesn't
that
have
was
a handle,
ridiculous.
so to open it, and there are dihedral doors, like kind of like a gull wing.
Yeah.
And so there's a little button, like a rubberized button inside is kind of like the section that channels air into the intake. And so you kind of have to feel around for it, so you do have to do a little bit of touchy-feely. But once you find it, it's pretty easy to open. But for Sam this morning, when I picked him up, it was pouring rain.
It's like pouring
I couldn't
rain.
figure out how to unlock the door and
But
so
it's like everything.
the button to unlock the door is like on the left side of the dashboard, and
Okay.
it's a button. I just had never used it before, so I was like, "Oh, it's pouring. Sam's getting soaked." He's like, "I don't know where the button is."
Well, I'm like, first it's pouring rain, and I'm like, oh, like, how do I open it? I have no idea. And she's like, oh, there's a button. So I like stick my hand down the side of the door, and I'm like,
your whole hand fits
Alright.
too. It's like,
and then so I'm
huge.
like, okay, I feel it. I'm like, it's not opening. So then she rolls it down. Mind you, it's raining on me
Yeah.
this whole time.
So
and
wait,
she's
she
like,
yelled
okay,
at
wait.
you through the window.
Yeah, at first.
window
Well, she
opened.
gestured
I
like
didn't want
it's
to get
in.
wet. Come on.
And then she rolls down the window, and I'm like, it's not unlocked. So then she unlocks it, and then I get it, and I'm soaking wet. But yeah, it was kind of funny because I had no
Okay.
idea where the door handle was or.
And that's part of the fun of the supercar, though, because everything is not normal.
Right.
Everything just takes a little bit of like, oh, hey, that's cool. Like there's no park, for example. You just put it in neutral and put
And
on the
then put the
handbrake.
parking brake, yes.
Yeah, which is not a handbrake. You're right. It's an electronic one.
The 12CI also had the most awkward location for climate control, which was on the armrest.
This one is not. They have everything's in the
Everything's in the
center
center now?
console,
Okay.
so they have this touch
That
screen.
makes
It's like a
more
little bit
sense.
of a tablet size. And what I love the most about the 720 is how like focused it is. So to do stuff like climate control, you have to hit a button and then do it on the touch screen.
Okay.
But for example, to do stuff like put it into track mode or sport mode, or anything driving related, all of that stuff is front and center.
Right.
So it's just extremely focused. It has this beautiful unfinished carbon fiber steering wheel. So it's like got a little bit of a matte
Yeah.
finish, and there are no buttons. There's no distractions. It has this, so for the gauge cluster, it's a touch screen, but that flips down and hides and has a smaller screen when you're in track mode, which only shows you the RPMs and what gear you're in. So it's just so pure, and I just love that like focused driving purity and it's amazing.
And it has a dual clutch transmission, right?
7-speed.
Right. And you have to flip through these gears with the paddle shifters,
Paddle
right?
shifters, yeah.
Now, when I had it, one of the things that I remember about the 12C is that every action that you put into this vehicle has to be done very deliberately. Putting your foot on the brakes were so stiff that you really have to
Yes.
put a lot of pressure in there. And if you let off, the car starts creeping forward.
Yeah,
Just the tiniest bit, and it starts
you
going.
do have to get used to braking. I feel like that was maybe the biggest learning curve for
Adjustment,
me
yeah.
because it's got these like massive carbon ceramics on it, right? And they're so good. But yeah, the pedal is extremely stiff, so you have to get used to it.
And then same with the paddle shifter is when you reach for a gear, it really feels like you have to be deliberate in your action. It's not just
Is
like
it
a tap.
stiff?
Yeah, that's what I
I like
remember.
that.
It's and it was also one piece, so that when you pulled on one side, you could feel the other side kind of like go away from
It's
you.
like an
neat.
F1 car.
Yeah, it was
That's
so
pretty cool.
neat. So I hope the 720 maintains that really
Yeah.
focused feel.
Everything
behind the
just
wheel.
takes a little bit of work, which I love.
That's awesome.
But it's not work that makes me think like, oh, this isn't worth it, because it's always worth
Right.
it for this car. Even like it's just beautiful, and not only is it super focused on driving, but it's also very luxurious. And so like my boyfriend Chris, he's like 6'4", big guy. When we had the Huracan, for example, it was so uncomfortable for him. Even
Right.
you found it really uncomfortable, the Huracan.
I hated that thing.
It's
Yeah.
just very uncomfortable.
I'm sure it's
and
fun to drive, but I
not
didn't like
very
being in it.
luxurious inside. And so in the 720S, Chris was comfortable. He had enough room. I felt great. I didn't get tired after a long drive.
All right.
It is very comfortable, except it gets really hot.
Right.
It gets really hot in there, and no matter how cold I have the air conditioning, I am boiling because the engine is like right there.
And you're making it work.
And it produces so much heat. So
and
I'm
it's
just
like a glass canopy roof, so
Yeah.
you're in like a bit of a
so
bubble.
it's like a greenhouse. So I'm like super sweaty, which is not luxurious, but
Also the parking sensor this morning.
there was an issue with that. So because we have front plates, because we're like this,
Yeah.
the whole front plate system is stupid. They had to install a system to hold a front plate, and so it blocks a little bit of the safety sensor up there. So it's a parking sensor,
Okay.
and so for the longest time, Sam and I were just driving to work this morning. It was just beep,
Oh,
beep,
no.
and it was so annoying.
And you could see like the corner on the screen. You could see the corner that it was like
Installed in, yeah.
triggering the sensor, and it was
Yeah.
just where the license plate was.
So
is
I
where
had
it
to
was
turn
being
off all the
triggered.
safety sensors.
man.
It was just too annoying, but that wouldn't happen anywhere else because they don't have front plates. So, but yeah, I mean, everything was luxurious. The seats are amazing. All the materials. There's a ton of carbon
How
fiber.
much did you say this thing was?
In Canada, it is 420 something thousand.
Oh my gosh.
In the US, it starts at just over 300.
That's So much money.
It's so much money, but it is so good.
Okay, all right, I'll believe you.
And yeah, it's just I love how dramatic it is, and
Yeah.
it's different, you know. So
That's
like
the point
you
of a
see,
supercar. It's got to be. It needs to
I
stand
know, but you see something like an Aventador or something go down the road,
Those
and
are
you're
pretty
like,
sweet.
yeah, I know it's pretty cool, but it's you see them kind of often, and so like
Where do you live?
In Toronto.
in Toronto.
That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. I just feel like, and this McLaren was just so special because it's different. It also has a huge frunk,
Okay.
big old frunk. We fit
Big
lots of
parcel
stuff.
shelf too behind you.
Yeah,
The
there's a
parcel
big
shelf.
parcel
Nice.
shelf in the
Yeah.
back. It's actually perfect for holding pizza because it gets so hot up there. It's a nice flat surface.
So there you have it. McLaren 720S, best pizza delivery car.
Right.
Yeah, I would take it.
It is funny because you're right. When you get into an Aventador or a Huracan, it seems like it's not built for human beings at all. Like you get in there, you fold yourself in, you're
Yeah.
like, I can't move my seat any further up or down or like sideways. This is just the way I drive now.
Yeah.
I have to duck under the windshield now to see
I
what's
found the Huracan seats, like, they weren't angled properly. I felt like I was sitting forward like this. I'm like, I don't want to
Yeah.
be here anymore.
Yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable, and like I was okay with making that sacrifice, but the 720
doesn't happen.
doesn't make you do that.
That's
Like
pretty
it's pretty
sweet.
comfortable and it's fast, and I love all the details. Like even the turn signal stock and like the wiper stock.
Feels so cool
They're
and
made out
lightweight,
of
right?
they're made out of this like coated metal or aluminum. Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah.
And they're like slightly cold to the touch. They feel substantial. It's just like everything you touch feels expensive.
That's awesome.
And
that's
I
what
love
that's what a
that.
$424,000 car
Yeah,
should feel
but it's
like.
also functional. Like everything is there. Every little detail in the design is built to make it go faster. So like
Cool.
better aerodynamics. It has this crazy like adaptive wing that you can use as an air brake or for more downforce if you're on a track or something like that.
I love that. It's so distracting to see in the mirror too. It's like doing all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff, and you're like, yeah, working.
It's a computer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love driving it. It is so fun and so dramatic. I feel like a boss driving that car.
Well, you are the boss, Jodi.
Quite
we
literally.
report to you, so
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, it was amazing. I
Well,
can't wait to drive it some
That's
more.
a pretty sweet car to end this week's podcast on. Once again, I have to ask you guys to send us your questions. You can do that on the YouTube page. You can do that at on our email address, tips@AutoGuide.com. You can even do it on AutoGuide somewhere. When we publish this story, we have a comment section below that. If you have any questions or feedback or comments, we read them. We love most of them. And we will surely answer some of the questions that you have for next week's podcast or in 2 weeks from now. I also want to ask you to subscribe to us on YouTube, on iTunes, on Google Play Music, on Google Podcasts, on what else do we got?
Pocket Cast.
Pocket Cast, yes. Any of your favorite podcast clients, jump in there, subscribe to us, like us, and leave us a review in there as well. That usually helps with visibility, and it will get more people asking silly questions or really serious questions like Blake did with his Cadillac question earlier today. But that's it. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. I think me and Brett are going to Pebble Beach, and we're going to be driving some fancy cars.
Yeah.
So we'll have more fancy cars to talk about. We're not just talking about crossovers like everyone else does.
Right.
So, thanks for
Thanks,
watching,
guys.
and be sure to come back on AutoGuide.com where you can catch the latest features, comparisons, and reviews, as well as the latest news, all written by Sam.
Woohoo! I have the best team ever. Bye guys. Thanks for watching.